the Overman Warrior Podcast.
Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. No surprise on the Supreme Court siding against the Virginia redistricting plan. Those redistricting gerrymandering schemes that the Democrats came up with, which we're undoing now for good reasons. It's like I've said all along. There are a lot more Republicans in the United States than Democrats. In the gerrymandering scheme that Democrats have been doing, where they zigzag these districts all over the place in order to try and capture minority votes that they expect to vote Democrat, to capture them wherever they may happen to be, to try and give them some disproportionate ability to outvote other people who live around them. Well, they're minorities for a reason. And all these gerrymandering schemes were to try and throw free things at these minorities and then convince them to vote Democrat so they get more free stuff. And they gerrymandered all these districts completely unconstitutionally. I've always said that. It was never legal. It was always a scam. And Republicans should have never played along with it, but they did. Because they wanted to be nice. They didn't want to play hardball with the Democrats that were happy to cheat. I always say it. And more people are saying it now than they've ever said it before. Democrats can't win if they can't cheat. When you look at all these maps of Ohio, maps of Iowa, maps of even New Mexico, California, you see a lot of red counties. And then you have a few little blue areas that supposedly run the whole state, and they make up 50% of all the vote counts. That's not how it is. You can't have that much red out there in the world, and Democrats try to gain a 50% even Steven House and Senate occupancy when they know the trend is against them without cheating. Democrats can't win if they can't cheat. That's why they don't want voter ID. That's why they want gerrymandering. That's why they want mail-in ballots. That's why they want to have voting going on, not voting day on the day of election in November. But most of their people are laying around the house stoned out of their mind, can't even get up off the couch. So they have to have early voting. And they have to start voting like the previous year, in January of the previous year, in order to get all their voters to get up off the couch and go out and vote for their stuff. That's the only way they can even get close to a 50% majority. And now they're all melting because the Supreme Court said, you know what, you can't discriminate against people, even in a favorable way, in order to give them disproportionate voting rights. They have a right to vote, yes. They don't have a right to take all those blue areas and try and combine them so they can get more congressional seats and Senate seats. That's not fair. That's not how it's supposed to work. You can't gerrymander to just try and bring districts together that otherwise wouldn't be represented in a normal republic. So, of course, the Supreme Court was going to find all those unconstitutional, and they are. And the Supreme Court upheld the Supreme Court of Virginia when they found their own map to be completely done wrong in the way they were trying to do it. That means that there's going to be a lot more Republican seats in Congress, and that this idea of the midterms going, what have I said? I've told everybody, I told you the truth on COVID way in advance. I tell you the truth about money matters way in advance, way before they happen. I tell you about technology like Hyperloop and Joby Aviation, the air taxis. I tell everybody these things. I talk about Ed Choice and money funding is not going to be attached to the zip codes anymore. They're going to go to the kids. I tell everybody these things, and why people want to say, bad Rich Hoffman for pointing that out. He's so mean. He's anti-kid. He's anti-schools. He's anti all these little accusations they make. He's against everything. Actually, I'm for a lot of things. I'm a very positive person, and I tell people things way in advance. And I tell people Supreme Court cases all the time. If you remember in COVID, I was way out on a limb on COVID. I told everybody all the government mandates are going to be unconstitutional. I told you it was a lab leak. And now we have CIA testimony saying that it was completely covered up. Dr. Fauci is wrapped up in it, and he should be prosecuted. A lot of people should be prosecuted for what they did in that. And now we have testimony to the Senate saying so. And now you have to act on that information. which I told everybody that over 6 years ago. I was in front of Rush Limbaugh on that issue. Even Rush Limbaugh wasn't coming out and saying anything about this being a lab leak. Everybody's playing along because they wanted to believe in the American health system, and that Dr. Fauci had to have known. You can't just say, oh my gosh, we can't trust these people, these health experts. They wouldn't do something deliberately bad to us. Well, we found out they would and did. Amy Acton in Ohio certainly did, and she had to know. All the people who were in on Event 201 knew. CIA people knew. FBI knew. Dr. Fauci knew. Bill Gates knew. They all knew, and it's come out in trickles and testimony since then. But I told everybody up front, and I told everybody that these gerrymandering districts were illegal, that they were never going to hold up if legal scrutiny were applied. They would fail in the Supreme Court, which I said, always said, people should listen. Listen, you'll do a lot better in life. Just listen. Just shut up and listen. You'll do far better. You'll make a lot more money, and you'll have a lot better life if you just shut up and listen. And they should have listened to me on the gerrymandering issue. And you don't have to play nice with Democrats, because Democrats do not represent a majority of the United States. They represent minorities. And minorities get a chance to vote like anybody else, but they don't have a right to shape society towards a minority opinion. And that's what Democrats have been up to. And that's why they've been doing these gerrymandering things. They give away free stuff to minorities, hoping to give them, what they consider open mobility and an unfair advantage as a minority group that they've thrown taxpayer-funded stuff at to buy votes, essentially, because Democrats can't earn it any other way. They have to cheat. And we always say they have to cheat. They have to give away votes. They have to buy votes with free stuff. Power of government confiscates from people who otherwise make the money, and they give it away to people disenfranchised or who are too lazy to go make it on their own. And so they want to buy their votes by using the power of government to confiscate wealth. And of course, in order to keep it even somewhat in the House and Senates of state and federal legislature, they've been doing this gerrymandering scheme forever. And now it's all been ruled unconstitutional. States now need to go and redraw their districts so they aren't drawing them to favor race. You should not, for pros or cons, discriminate against anybody of any color. It shouldn't even be a factor out there. People should have equal rights to vote. Women can vote. Men can vote. People of different colors can vote. If you're a citizen, you should be able to vote for the kind of representative government you want. It's a right. You don't get to gerrymander and break things up to try and buy votes with free stuff and then draw districts that favor those minorities in racial ways so that you can gain power that you don't deserve any other way, Democrats. If you can't earn votes by your persuasion, by an argument, by discussion in a republic, through philosophy, if you can't get there that way, then you don't deserve the seats. And they've been getting them forever. I've been saying again, the 50-50 majority that we kind of have in the House and Senate is not a 50-50 majority. Republicans, if there wasn't election fraud going on with gerrymandering, or illegal ballots being counted, dead people being on voter rolls, voter ID not being implemented in some of these states, the Republicans would have a massive majority. And it looks like that's how it's going to go in these midterms. It looks like the favoritism is going to go in the House. And like I've been saying that all along, staying with the Republicans. Democrats cannot win if they cannot cheat. And the more cheating mechanisms you take away, the less opportunities they're going to have to ever win another seat ever again. I don't think they'll ever have a majority. That all the majorities have ever had as Senate majority leaders or House majority leaders, Speaker of the House, whatever it is, they have never had true majorities because there's not that many Democrats in the United States. You know, they just aren't out there. The math isn't there. I've seen the numbers precinct for precinct, and they just don't exist. Only through election fraud do they exist. Only made up phony numbers on paper and gerrymandering. And Republicans never had to play along with that, but they did. And look at the damage that's been done because they allowed Democrats to have a 50-50 split on power because they like to make deals with them at lunch on Capitol Hill. That is not how you're supposed to. You're sent to those offices to do the people's business, and that doesn't mean making deals with people who otherwise wouldn't have them. If they cheated to win those power positions, they need to be punished for what they did, knowingly did. And the Supreme Court has done right to reel that in to some extent. It's happening now. But I said it all along. It was always going to be illegal. People should listen. I've explained it and explained it and explained it. I talk about these Supreme Court cases. I've told you all the stories about Ken Paxton and Mike Lindell. And remember early on with Rudy Giuliani? I said all that. I said everything about Trump. All the court cases, I called them all well in advance. And I called this one way in advance, these Supreme Court cases on gerrymandering. They're going the right way, and the Democrats are going to find they don't have majorities. And I've always said that. Republicans should listen, dig in, fight the Democrats because they are the minority party. They do not have a right to have shared power, and they don't have a right to rig our elections to favor their gains for power, their power grabs. They never had the majorities. They never are going to have the majorities. They cannot make an argument to win majorities. So they are a dying party propped up by election fraud. And I can say that, honestly, people might say it's conspiracy. People who consider themselves Democrats might think it's mean, it's hateful. The numbers just aren't there. There aren't that many people on the Democrat side. Hollywood hasn't been able to turn people into Democrats, and it's gone the other way, as a matter of fact. There's probably fewer Democrats now than there used to be because Democrats have not been a party of profit for American lives and families. And they can't make an argument that they stand for it because they've worked against families for over a century now. And the only way they could even somewhat stay in power is by having election fraud, phony ballots counted, and gerrymandering, which they divide up these districts in ways that were horrible. And that's how they were able to keep it somewhat close in the House and Senate. And sometimes get some majorities, but they never were real on paper. They were never real in actuality. And the minute you take away the schemes for voter fraud, they find themselves losing everywhere. And that's what's going to happen here in the midterms. And I told you well in advance. Listen! Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
In the age of disclosure, you must understand the politics of heaven. Coming soon.
Coming soon, the politics of heaven in 2027. A treasure hunt through heaven and all human history.